So, today I'll be interviewing one of my fellow university students and high school friends, Ethan Lawrence, who is here to talk all about the burden of representation. Thanks for chatting, Ethan. It's great to have you here.
Thank you for having me here, Tobias. It's wonderful to be here.
So I understand that a minority group is a group that is not common within a particular society due to not sharing common characteristics with the main group. How does this affect their depiction in the media?
Yes, that's correct. Due to not having similar characteristics with the most of the community, such as race, religion, sexuality, etc., makes someone fall into a minority group. Most people would call themselves mainstream because they are what they believe is normal. This is because they have grown up becoming culturally accustomed to their way of life and have surrounded themselves with people that share corresponding lifestyles to them. They are afraid of what they don't know. When consuming media, particularly when the topic is about a controversial issue, people often see it from a perspective of us versus them. Us is an exclusive in-group which includes only those people who share distinct characteristics with each other. The media mostly assume that people in this category are heterosexual Anglo-Saxon conservative and in the middle class. Anyone who does not fit this specific mold is considered to be in an out-group, which consists of everybody else that is not accepted in the in-group due to differences that are deemed to be too sizable. Our media often exaggerates these distinguishable factors to create drama and headlines, which attracts them views and makes them money.
So what does the burden of representation that some people hold, and how does it work?
The burden of representation is when in a public arena, such as the media on popular television stations, websites and newspapers that people like us see, minority groups are not only representing their identity, but that of their entire minority groups. For example, recently we have seen many similar instances of young African men on our screens that appear to be criminally offending. This creates the impression amongst us that all African men must be this way. The burden of representation exists if there is seclusion. If the person being shown is separated from contrasting portrayals of their group, then they are holding the full burden of representation because in their particular instance it is solely their responsibility to stand up for their group and symbolise them.
Okay, so what would be some examples of the burden of representation transpiring that I would have seen in the media?
A lot of Chris Lilly's television shows are rife with characters that hold heavy burdens and are written to poorly represent their respective groups. Unfortunately, in my view, there is not a character who Lilly portrays that actually enhances your opinion of the group that they represent. For example, Chris Lilly in both Angry Boys and We Can Be Heroes depicts Asian parents who convey excessive discipline on their children achieving highly and don't allow them any freedom to pursue hobbies for leisure through Ricky Wong and Jen Okazaki. In reality, we know that this is not true and there are plenty of Asian parents who are happy for their kids to live their own lives and make independent choices. However, the media rarely shows this representation, making it unbalanced. Lilly's work includes no other representations of Asian people, so this guides the viewer to conclude that all Asian parents are ridiculously tight with rules, and this forms a rigid and stereotypical impression of them that becomes ingrained into the viewer through repetition of similar jokes in each episode.
Are the media the only ones who do this, or does it occur in daily life as well?
Sadly, the general public are also guilty of stereotypically labelling how people should be based on categories that they fall into. We could argue that this is due to the media's massive influence on society, or that the media is only reflecting what society wants to hear, but that's a debate for another day. An example of someone who we both saw carry the burden of representation in high school was Alex Koo, who was a Chinese student that was not mathematically gifted at all. Our school was mostly unicultural, with no program for international students. The uneducated school community, both students and staff, picked on this guy and teased him about not achieving A+ in maths, when this kid was struggling to even pass maths at all and wasn't in any state to think about topping the class, even though everyone expected him to because of his Chinese culture's reputation for being strong in maths. He was the only one there, so no one was there to help him share the burden of representation that he had to carry when he was flying his country's flag figuratively.
I understand that bad representations create negative impressions amongst the community, but surely a positive representation of someone can't do any harm to the reputation of those that they represent.
It can be deceptive when the image is positive, and most people concur with the favourable representation of a group. But no group is ever homogeneous. There are always differences within the group. If one person is secluded from the rest of the group, it is inflexible, and their actions are seen to be uniform across their demographic group that they're representing. Therefore, they are carrying the burden. Consequently, this forms a mould that all future group members are expected to adapt to, and allows restricted scope for them to develop their own individual style, without causing headlines due to creating contrast to how society had pigeonholed a group.
How can I avoid unfairly stereotyping minority groups when I hear about their pursuits in the media?
A way to not be sucked in by it is to not believe what you see at its face value. Always consider the factors that I've talked about. So think to yourself, is this person by themselves, or have the producers actually bothered to show other portrayals of other characteristics within the same perceived outgroup? Is this a common stereotype that you just assume of the other group who you don't know well? Have you seen the opposite of this yourself? For example, we both know an African person who is a well-behaved citizen that has never criminally offended, and he's also not very talented at sports either. But the media will mostly show you the opposite of both these factors.
Thank you so much for talking to me today, Ethan. I've learned a lot, and I'm so glad to be aware of an issue that I previously disregarded and that didn't occur to me at all.
It has been my absolute pleasure to be here, thanks Tobias.